The evening began like any other. The tall glass building of the company gleamed against the skyline, filled with restless energy as employees rushed to meet deadlines. The CEO, a man who had built his empire with relentless effort and discipline, was preparing for the quarterly presentation that would determine the company's future. Investors from across the globe were waiting, and millions of dollars were at stake. But just as the boardroom filled with executives, screens went dark. At first it was a small glitch, one monitor freezing, then another. Within minutes, the entire system collapsed. Servers shut down, files disappeared, and all communication lines broke. Panic spread through the room like wildfire. Engineers rushed forward, typing frantically, rebooting systems and muttering technical jargon that offered no solution. The CEO sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his usually commanding presence replaced by worry. He knew the company's heart was its system. Without it, operations halted, transactions froze, and credibility crumbled. The investors were expecting numbers tonight. If nothing worked, his reputation would shatter, and everything he had built over decades would turn to dust. His voice was steady but heavy when he finally said, "Try again. Check the servers. We cannot afford to fail." The IT team worked like soldiers in battle. Sweat trickled down their faces as they tried one solution after another. The system refused to respond. Each failed attempt tightened the silence in the room until the CEO leaned back in his chair, loosened his tie, and whispered words no one thought they'd ever hear from him. "It's over." At that moment, in a distant corner of the building, a woman quietly mopped the marble floors. She was the maid, invisible to most, present every day but rarely acknowledged. Her hands were rough from work, her back sore from long hours, yet her spirit carried dignity. Tonight, she had brought her teenage son with her. He usually stayed home, buried in secondhand books and tinkering with an old laptop he had repaired himself, but she couldn't leave him alone this late. The boy had a spark in his eyes, the kind that came from curiosity and an untamed hunger for knowledge. While his mother cleaned silently, he wandered near the restricted hallways, listening to the noise from the boardroom. The sound of panic caught his attention. He edged closer and overheard desperate voices. Critical crash, system failure, bankruptcy. His heart raced. He peeked inside. The sight of powerful men and women, defeated and pale, stirred something inside him. They were staring at screens filled with lines of code, yet none of them seemed to know what to do. His mother noticed him at the doorway and rushed over, whispering urgently, "Stay back, this isn't your place." But before she could drag him away, the boy spoke. "I think I can help." The room went still. The CEO turned, his sharp eyes narrowing at the sight of a janitor's child daring to speak. One executive chuckled bitterly. "We don't need games right now," another added. "Kid, you don't even know what this is." But the boy didn't look away. His gaze stayed fixed on the frozen code projected on the large screen. "Your firewall is looping into itself. It's choking your system. If you don't patch the root directory, it will never restart." The engineers blinked, confused. Some leaned closer to their monitors, realizing the boy might not be entirely wrong. The CEO, desperate but skeptical, stared at him. For the first time that night, there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "And you think you can fix this?" The boy nodded. His voice carried no arrogance, just certainty. His mother panicked. "Sir, please forgive him. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's just a child." But the CEO raised his hand. His voice was quiet but commanding. "Bring him a laptop." Gasps rippled through the room. The engineers protested. "This is absurd. We can't hand over company data to a random boy. What if he makes it worse?" The CEO silenced them with a look. At this point, they had already failed. Nothing could be worse than losing everything. The boy sat down. His hands trembled for only a second before his fingers began to move across the keys with astonishing speed. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of typing. Line after line of code appeared, his commands crisp, his logic precise. The engineers leaned over his shoulder, shocked at how effortlessly he navigated the structure. "How does he know this?" one whispered. Another muttered, "He's rewriting the core access." Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat dripped down the boy's forehead, but his focus never wavered. His mother stood frozen at the doorway, wringing her hands, terrified that one mistake would bring humiliation or anger upon them. Then suddenly, the screen flickered. A heartbeat appeared in the form of green lines. Servers buzzed back to life, data streams reopened, and transactions flooded through again. The system roared awake, stronger than before. Gasps echoed across the boardroom. "It's working! It's actually working!" an engineer exclaimed. The CEO stood slowly, staring in disbelief as the lifeless system became whole again. The boy leaned back, exhausted but calm. "I just broke the loop and reset the kernel path," he explained quietly. The CEO walked toward him, his footsteps echoing. The room held its breath. Finally, he placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You didn't just fix a system. You saved this company." His mother's eyes filled with tears. She had always known her son was gifted, but never imagined he would shine in a moment like this. The CEO turned to her, his voice soft but resolute. "Your son belongs here, not as a cleaner's child, but as one of us." The boy lowered his eyes, humbled, while the executives stared at him in awe. In that instant, the hierarchy of power shifted. The janitor's son had become the savior of giants. What had started as the company's darkest hour was about to become the beginning of a story that no one would forget. The story of that night spread through the building faster than electricity. By morning, everyone knew what had happened. The system had collapsed, the company had faced certain ruin, and it was a Maid's son who had saved it all. Employees whispered in the hallways, investors demanded to meet the mysterious boy, and even the strictest executives struggled to hide their awe. The CEO didn't let time waste. He called an emergency board meeting the very next day, and for the first time in company history, the Maid stood inside the boardroom with her son by her side. She felt small, her uniform reminding her of her place, but her son walked with quiet confidence, still overwhelmed, yet steady. The CEO addressed the board. His voice carried strength again, not the hopelessness of the night before. "This young man saved our future when even our experts could not. He deserves more than thanks. He deserves opportunity." Some executives shifted uncomfortably. A few clapped politely, but others frowned. One senior officer muttered, "Sir, with all due respect, he's just a child. He has no formal education, no credentials. Are we really considering—" The CEO cut him off with a sharp look. "Credentials mean nothing if genius is ignored. I built this empire from nothing, and I will not allow us to overlook talent because of pride." He turned to the boy. "From today, you are no longer just a visitor here. You will have access to our labs, our systems, our mentors. Learn, grow, and make this your second home." The boy's mother tried to protest, her voice trembling. "Sir, he is still young, he has school, and we cannot afford distractions." But the CEO smiled at her kindly. "Madam, this is not a distraction. This is destiny. You raised a remarkable son, and I will ensure he gets the future he deserves." The boy bowed his head slightly, whispering, "Thank you, sir." Life changed almost overnight. Instead of walking past the building as an outsider, he now walked inside like he belonged. He was given a badge, a small workspace, and access to systems he had only ever dreamed of. Engineers who once scoffed at him now tested him with questions, only to be left speechless by his solutions. The boy absorbed knowledge like a sponge, learning languages of code faster than most learned a new alphabet. But not everyone was happy. Whispers of resentment began to stir. Some engineers felt threatened, embarrassed that a teenager had succeeded where they had failed. They muttered that he was a fluke, that he had just been lucky that night. Others feared the CEO was giving him too much attention, as if the boy would one day replace them. One evening, as the boy worked late, a senior engineer approached him. His tone was sharp, almost mocking. "You think you're special because of one night? You don't understand how this world works. Companies don't run on miracles, kid. They run on experience, on hierarchy. Remember your place." The boy didn't argue. He just smiled faintly and returned to his screen. But the words stayed with him. He knew he had stepped into a world that didn't fully accept him. Days turned into weeks. The CEO grew increasingly impressed. Whenever there was a problem, the boy offered insights no one else could. He wasn't always right, but his perspective was fresh, daring, and often brilliant. The CEO began bringing him into high-level meetings, introducing him to investors and partners as the mind that saved us. Then came the real test. A month later, the company prepared for its biggest project yet, a new platform that would connect millions of users globally. It was meant to be the crown jewel of the company, but just days before launch, disaster struck again. The system faltered under pressure, glitches multiplied, and the deadline loomed dangerously close. Panic returned. This time, however, everyone looked to the boy. The CEO called him into the control room. "We need you again. The system isn't stable, and if we fail this launch, it will cost us everything. Do you think you can help?" The boy hesitated. His fingers twitched nervously. This wasn't just a crash. This was an entirely new challenge. He had never dealt with something so massive. Doubt crept in, and for the first time he whispered, "What if I fail?" The CEO placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Failure is not falling short. It is refusing to try. You already proved what you are capable of. Trust yourself." Taking a deep breath, the boy sat before the glowing screens. Lines of error code filled the monitors like a maze of chaos. Engineers surrounded him, watching, some still skeptical, others silently hoping. His mother waited outside the door, praying under her breath. The boy began to type. Hours passed. He tried one solution, then another, encountering walls of failure. His heart pounded, sweat dripping down his face. The mocking words of jealous engineers echoed in his mind. "Remember your place." Doubt clawed at him. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was just lucky that first night. But then he remembered his mother's sacrifices, the nights she returned home exhausted, the meals she skipped so he could eat, the quiet encouragement she always gave him when no one else believed. He remembered the CEO's faith, the look of trust in his eyes, and he remembered that moment when lifeless screens had come alive beneath his fingers. He closed his eyes for a moment, then returned to the code with renewed determination. His fingers moved faster now, restructuring, bypassing, rebuilding. He wasn't just fixing errors, he was redesigning the entire system's backbone. At midnight, just as the final countdown for the launch approached, the monitors lit up green. The glitches vanished. The system ran smoothly, faster than it had ever had. The platform was ready. Cheers erupted in the control room. Engineers clapped him on the back, some still stunned, others finally respecting him fully. The CEO's face lit up with pride. "You've done it again," he said, almost in disbelief. The boy leaned back, exhausted but smiling. His mother rushed inside, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. The CEO looked at her with deep respect. "Madam, your son is not just a boy anymore. He is the future, and I promise you, he will never be overlooked again." From that night forward, his life was never the same. What began as the son of a maid quietly walking behind his mother had become the story of a young genius rewriting destiny. And though many still doubted, whispered, or envied him, none could erase the truth. He was the boy who rose from the shadows, saved a collapsing empire twice, and proved to the world that brilliance is not born from privilege, but from passion, courage, and an unbreakable will.